Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Townsquare Media Jersey Shore's Ask the Chief in the newsroom here in Toms River, along with Barnegat Police Chief Keith Germain. It's the third episode in our series, following previous conversations with Toms River Police Chief Mitch Little and Brick Township Police Chief James Riccio, where we allow a Jersey Shore Police Chief to come in here, answer some of your questions, discuss current events, community programs, and more. And we'll start with a recent crime investigation, and by recent I mean like 12 to 36 hours ago,
Sure.
with a threat that turned out to be somewhat unfounded at the Brackman Middle School in Barnegat yesterday. Your department worked with the school district to investigate, to take a look at things and release information as it was warranted. So what happened? How did you hear about the report? Did it come from students? And take me a little bit through the investigation, how that all worked out yesterday.
Yeah, so first off, we put a lot of time in building our relationships with the school district, with the other stakeholders in the community, so that when information comes in, when somebody hears something that concerns them, we don't have to waste time trying to establish who needs to call who, whose responsibility is it to look into it. We have that framework in place, and that's important. So in a case like this, students reported something that they had heard that gave them concern. They reported it, did the right thing, reported it to staff at the school. That quickly made its way to the superintendent, and Dr. Latwis called me directly. I have a great relationship with Dr. Latwis, and he was able to get that information to us right away. And at that point, we go ahead and look into it, use our resources to determine whether it's a credible threat, and take the steps that we need to do to ensure that the students and the district and the town is safe. Where we run into problems is before we even really get into the investigation. It's just the nature of today and technology and communication. The rumor is spooled up everywhere. So it's already blowing through Snapchat with the kids talking about, different rumors. And then the parents are talking about different rumors on Facebook. So we have this, everybody knows something is going on or thinks something is going on. So we're put in a challenging position because, we have to manage the information in a way that we let parents know and let the community know, hey, we know there's a concern. Mm-hmm. We're dealing with it, but we can't really tell you a lot, because if we tell you things that jeopardize the investigation, there's really no point in us doing any of this. So for us, it's walking that line of trying to let the community know, hey, we're on top of this. Mm-hmm. You have to trust us to do the right thing to keep the community safe. And when we can tell you, the details, we certainly will tell you. But as you could imagine, you want to deal with these things very quickly, and sometimes you don't have the time to put into, we're not an NYPD. We don't have a communications division with professional public relations people on staff. We have to focus on the task at hand, and sometimes communication, unfortunately, takes a little bit of a back seat to that while we're focused on the mission. So. And
you had several canine dogs kind of looking for any kind of weapons at the schools. Everything was given the all clear.
Yep. So there's another great example of building relationships beforehand. When you want to check a school using canines, canines, much like humans, have very short attention spans. So, we can't put a dog in a school and ask it to go search for hours on end through a large building.
Right.
So we need a lot of dogs. So in the case of the Brackman School, we need about 9 canines to do that appropriately. We don't have 9 canines, nor do any of the agencies around us, so we leverage our relationships throughout and beyond Ocean County, and we were able in a very short period of time to get 9 different canine officers from agencies as varied as New Jersey Transit, as far away as West Windsor Police Department, so that we could quickly and efficiently conduct a search of that school.
Is the juvenile facing any kind of charges from the incident, or I know I read from the school that the school district itself is not allowing him back in the school until they feel it's safe to do so, but is he facing any, or she facing any criminal charges?
So as we complete the investigation, if we find that there's probable cause that it warrants a charge for terroristic threats, we'll absolutely sign a juvenile complaint for terroristic threats.
Through the course of the investigation, going back to the social media thing, and it's something I brought up with Chief Riccio over in Brick a couple months back, which, speaking to him, following a month at the shooting near Brick Memorial High School. And we kind of went through that as that got reported and rumors started flowing through social media, people were saying it was a massive shooting inside the school, and it turned out that that was not the case. And I think him and his department certainly did a good job of trying to get ahead of those rumors and saying, well, it wasn't a massive shooting, and it didn't take place inside the school. So how does your department, how do you feel that police should try to get ahead of those rumors? You brought up with Snapchat and Facebook, Twitter, Instagram with, oh, well, I heard this, so it must be true, so let me get the word out there.
It's a great question. So there's two things that we do. One, we simply acknowledge the fact that we have a service population that is used to having a device in their hand that can give them any piece of information they want instantaneously, right?
Right.
So people are very used to that. So what's more important to people than the safety of their children, the safety of their family? So they want an answer, and they want it, if not now, 5 minutes ago. So we just have to acknowledge that that's going to be an expectation that we just simply will never meet. We're never going to be able to give people as much detail as they want, as instantaneously as they want. And I think both sides need to be honest about that. The other thing we do that I think is really important is we take the time when the bad things aren't happening to establish our relationships and our trust and our credibility with the community, so that when something like this does happen, if it's going to take us an hour to be able to tell them something, an hour from a law enforcement perspective is not a lot of time for us to get details and make sure we're not compromising an investigation, but to someone who's concerned, it's a massive amount of time. So I think if you've taken the steps to build that trust with your service population, it buys you some grace. It buys you some time in that they're willing to say, okay, we know the Barnegat Police Department's a very professional department. We know they're CLIA accredited. We know Barnegat has the lowest crime rate in Ocean County. We have to trust that they're doing the right thing, and I believe they're doing the right thing, and they'll let us know when they can. And I think the majority of the feedback we got in social media reflects that.
I know you touched on it earlier, but in terms of getting information out as you needed to get out there, especially to concerning parents or people in the community, take me again through, explain why you can only release certain bits of information, whether it's something like what happened yesterday, or if it's about bank robbery or somebody on the loose or a suspect you're looking for, why you can only release certain pieces of information to not give away too much of the investigation, so the person you're looking for, the people you're looking for, don't find out all that information.
Sure. So, I mean, just think about it from a logical perspective, not knowing anything about law enforcement. If we have information that somebody has some type of a weapon and that they're planning on using it, if we let people know, hey, there was a threat that an employee of this particular store is saying that he's going to come in with a gun and shoot up the store, but don't worry about it, we're on it. Well, what's the first thing that employee's going to do? He's going to hear that we're looking for him and the gun. The gun's going to disappear. The employee's going to disappear, and we can't do anything that resembles an effective investigation and solve that issue, recover that weapon. So it's really, when you take a step back, there's no secret law enforcement knowledge you need to be able to understand that. It's simply common sense. And beyond that, these investigations are incredibly resource intensive. There are a lot of moving parts. And, when it comes to prioritizing the mission, we have to focus on putting our resources into investigating and solving the problem. And any resources that we put into communication that take away from that investigation are counterproductive. So we walk a very fine line of trying to get information out quickly that can let people know we know there's an issue and we're working on it, but not so much that it jeopardizes the investigation or detracts resources from the investigation, so that we don't unduly slow things down.
You mentioned the prior question about having the lowest crime rate in Ocean County. Certainly that's something to be proud of, but how do you and your department reach that sort of, that plateau of having such a low crime rate in Ocean County?
I think it's a testament to the women and men of the agency. I get to sit in comfortable studios and talk to people like you, and people say, you're doing a great job, Chief. The reality is the people who are doing a great job are the people that are out working the street right now as you and I are sitting here.
Right.
And those street-level officers are the ones that are developing that relationship with the community. They're developing that trust. So when our residents see a problem or have an issue, we find out about it through those street level officers, those boots on the ground, and we empower our officers to bring those solutions, to us as an administration, as an agency, so we can solve the problems before they become a problem. That's a big part of it. Another really big part of it, honestly, is one and a challenge that the state faces everywhere, is proper staffing. If you look at the Barnegat Police Department of the 80s and 90s, it was woefully understaffed by any standard you used, right? We sat down around 1.6 officers per thousand, which is a very, very low number. Not surprisingly, during that time, we had the highest crime rate Barnegat's ever seen. Our crime rate was up to 5-6 times higher than it is today, right?
Wow.
So by properly staffing the police department, which they started to do through the mid 2000s up into our modern era now, you have essentially a much higher officer per thousand ratio. We sit at about 2.1 right now, and when we've had the highest officer to citizen ratios, we've not surprisingly had the lowest crime. So at that when we hit that pinnacle in about 2016, our crime rates were 75% lower than what they were in the 90s. So I think it's two big pieces. It's properly staffing the agency, but it's also having the dedicated, professional, and frankly very talented boots on the ground in the street officer that builds those relationships and trust with the community.
I know you recently also attended the FBI's National Academy down in Virginia. What was that experience like? What were some of the things you did or learned? And then what were some of the things that you were able to bring back to your department and either tell them how everything went or make any changes or improve on certain things?
Yeah, it's overall the experience of a lifetime, right? It's a once-in-a-career opportunity to be in the company of some really amazing leaders who have some spectacular accomplishments over the course of their career. And you can go to different training schools and maybe run into one or two people who you learn something from, who've done great things, who have a really good track record of success. Here, you're grouped with 260 of those people. So just every day, you're living in a confined space together for 3 months. You really have nothing to do but talk to each other,
right.
And you talk a lot of shop, and you learn both through the formal classroom structure, but really especially in those informal times when you're discussing different cases and experiences. It just gives you access to a vast wealth of experience and knowledge. And every day you find yourself writing things down like, hey, that's a great idea. That's something we can apply back home. Hey, they tried something that I'm thinking about trying, and it really didn't work well for them. So maybe that's not a direction we want to go in. So it really was just it gave you an unprecedented ability to really get a high altitude view of how great leaders are leading their agencies and solving problems.
In speaking with other chiefs, other people in law enforcement at the academy, what was the feeling you got, or the sense of sort of how police are perceived in 2020 or in this day and age, with different incidents going on around the state or around the country, whether it's something verbal or some sort of action, like I know the NYPD's been subject to a lot of those kind of incidents. In sort of bridging that piece or finding that commonality with residents, especially those who don't look well on police, with some of the rogue officers, so to speak, who have done the wrong thing, and they're certainly in the minority. So what were some of the things you learned at the academy about the state of police today, and how to sort of go about changing that in the community?
It's a great question, and I think one of the things that was most surprising to me, and probably was, if we want to call something shocking, was the most shocking thing I learned in the time I was down there, is that we have this perception because we see the occasional sensational news story about police who are perceived to have done something wrong. What we find is, when you actually look at the data, even today, when we feel like it's a very anti-police environment, the police are the third most trusted institution in the country. We fall just behind small business owners and the military. So we are so far ahead of the scale of so many other groups that, people in Congress can't even see us. They're so far down the scale. Police are a very trusted institution, and I think that fact gets lost on police because we just focus on the negative. We focus on the stories that sometimes are covered, and the news covers a lot of positive stories, but I don't think those ones really stick with us. They don't really have the legs that the negative stories do. So you get this misperception that there's a lot of negative, going on in policing, when the reality is, when you look at the polls, 85% of Americans have a great amount of trust in American law enforcement. So.
Going back to some things at the academy, what did you learn about security techniques or monitoring certain events going on in the community? I know I think it was within the last couple months anyway, about moving the 4th of July fireworks over to Barnegat High School. I know that was one of the questions that some residents in Barnegat had some questions about, especially initially. So what led to that decision? Was there anything you learned at the academy, or was that just part of a discussion with your department and the prosecutor's office?
Yeah, I would say that there wasn't anything I learned at the academy that made me make that decision, but there were things I learned at the academy that certainly reinforced for me that was the right decision. So again, when we look at soft target events, and anytime we have a gathering of people like that, it's a soft target by definition. But there are certain locations where it's just simply safer and easier for us to protect that area. And in this case, based on everything that I know and have experienced, I was not comfortable that we could provide the level of safety and protection if we held the fireworks at the dock, if we continued to hold them there. Again, having a great relationship with the school district, having the option to do it at the high school, for us, from a security standpoint, it is just much safer and much easier for us to provide a higher level of safety there. So it's really, when you look at it on paper, it is a no-brainer decision. I acknowledge it's not necessarily a popular one with some people, and I get that. You get thick skin as a chief, and probably one of the best leadership definitions I got while I was in Quantico is that leadership is disappointing your supporters at a rate they can absorb, and in this case, I think that's a great example of that.
Interesting. Do you have to look at each event that's planned in Barnegat with how much or how many patrol officers or how many undercovers to put at a certain event? Does it depend on what crowd is anticipated at a certain event, or is there like a status quo amount of officers or security that you have to provide at something?
We look at every single event as its own separate individual entity, and we take into account the anticipated size of the crowd. We take into account intelligence that we're getting from our partners, in the state police and federally and locally. So there's a lot of information that goes into deciding what level and what level of resources, what level of staffing, what level of equipment that we're going to provide to any given event. So one of the advantages to being a CALEA accredited department is CALEA requires us to have this framework in place. So we know that when it comes to planning for these type of special events, we know that we're meeting the standard, the best practices that exist in the profession. So that's, again, another reason why it's important to be involved in things like CALEA.
Another popular but sad item that happened recently was the passing of one of your canines, Bullet, who had some serious health issues. What impact did that have? Whatever emotions for you and the rest of your department?
Yeah, I think you don't see, when you look at dedication in police officers, it's hard to find officers as a group that have more dedication than canine officers. It's a huge undertaking for them. It's a huge personal undertaking because this is not a dog that stays at work. This is a dog they bring home with them. So there's an impact on their personal life, on their families, and it becomes a part of their family. It becomes a part of our law enforcement family. So when you have that much time personally invested into a canine partner like Patrolman Armstrong did, it's like losing a member of the family. It's something that's it's very emotional. It's very upsetting. It takes a toll. We're a tight knit family, so when you see one of your brother or sister officers that's that upset, that impacts the whole agency. And I think you saw from the turnout there, we had canine officers from a lot of different departments are in and around Ocean County that came out to give Rob that support, because they know how much of a toll that takes on a canine handler. So,
with that support that your department has, if they're whether it's passing necessarily of canine bull or some other incident, how do you and your department kind of work with officers in your department after maybe something tragic has happened, or they responded to an incident where even if nobody died, but they're still kind of hung up on some of the details or some of the things that happened? How do you encourage your officers or detectives, anybody, to find somebody to talk to about that and confide in so that they can go home and sleep at night?
It's an outstanding question. So this is a huge topic for us as a profession right now. Historically, we have done a terrible job of taking care of our officers. We know, because the data is there, that there are some really terrible long-term effects to doing this job for 25 years, right? We have higher incidences of type 2 diabetes, we have higher incidences of cancer, we have higher incidences of heart disease than the rest of the population, and we have really high incidences of suicide. And it's a problem that nobody really ever wanted to talk about. We know, even if we look at, last year, we look at 2019's numbers, as many officers as were killed in the line of duty, even more took their own lives through suicide. So this has been a big initiative for what we call resiliency. It's been a big initiative that came from the Attorney General, that he's come down and mandated that we get programs in place to deal with this. And I think this is one of those issues for law enforcement that's a big ship, little rudder issue, right? We have to really change the culture. When I came on the job in 1994, if you were upset about something, the last thing you would be comfortable doing is, sitting down and going, hey, this really bothered me. I think I really need to talk to somebody about that. It was frankly viewed as a weakness, and it was something that, forced officers to bottle these things up. And we know that bottling it up over the course of decades is absolutely terrible for you. So we're working very hard establishing these resiliency programs, establishing peer-to-peer programs, and encouraging officers to have those conversations, to give them an outlet so that they can, when they do experience something that's emotionally traumatic, that they have an outlet so they can communicate that and do it in a way that's that they feel comfortable. Remember, we're in a job where you have to carry a firearm, and officers have what I think is a very legitimate concern that if I go in and say, hey, this is really upsetting me and I'm stressed, they have to worry about that affecting their livelihood. They have to worry about somebody saying, hey, you're not okay, so we're going to take your gun away from you and you can't work. So it's been a real challenge designing programs that protect the officer while also giving them the confidence that they can seek help without it negatively impacting their career.
And to a lighter note, of one of the other questions that came from one of our social media followers, Helen, was she wants to know, when was the last time you had fun, had a spontaneous great time on the job, and what did you do?
Every day. I tell people that I can retire. I have enough time to retire. I don't need to come to work. I come to work because I still love coming in and working every day. I don't love it every day. I don't love it all day. But it's still a job that I enjoy, and it's because, and I say this, and it sounds so cliche, and my apologies to people out there who aren't in the profession, cops are the greatest people in the world. They really are. This is a group of people who've dedicated themselves to public service, and we tend to attract a group of people who have a great sense of humor. We spend a lot of time around each other and have fun. Kind of in a friendly way. Ribbing each other and just it's a really great environment to be in on a daily basis. It's a challenging environment. You never get bored. It's not the same thing every day. I got into this job because I didn't want to sit behind a desk Monday through Friday doing the same thing, which as a chief, I typically sit behind a desk Monday through Friday, often doing the same thing. There's some irony there. But I have fun just about every day I come to work. And when the job's not fun anymore and I don't feel like, I can be productive and contribute because it's not fun, well, then I'll quietly get out of the way and let the people who can do it better and with more energy get in there and do it.
Seems like you still have a good amount of energy to do that job.
just not as much as I used to, but it's still there. Yep.
Chief, thanks for coming in.
It's been great. Thank you, man.
That's Barnegat Police Chief Keith Germain for another episode of Ask the Chief. Make sure you stay tuned on our mobile app and social media channels for the announcement of the next episode of Ask the Chief, and where we'll have a forum for you to submit questions to the next chief we have on here. That's Barnegat Police Chief Keith Germain. I'm Vin Ebenau here in the newsroom for our third episode of Townsquare Media Jersey Shore's Ask the Chief.